stuff figured out there. So as you can see, I've got about 50 tabs open here, but pay no mind to that. I've been doing some research today. Ya boy's been busy coming out with new content for y'all. So my next new series, the big series here, is going to be on r/therapy. I like to go through here and check out what people are saying instead of getting a haircut, as you can tell, because COVID restrictions and all that jazz, and I'm not going to take a set of hedge clippers to my own head here. So there you go. I've been growing it out hippie style for a while. All right, so let's take a look at this. This is a big thing that I hear about a lot from people. It's this whole thing of like, oh, well, what's going on with therapy? Like, I'm not getting enough help. And that's a big thing that I see quite often, by the way. So let's talk about this idea of what you should be getting out of therapy. Okay? So that's a big thing. It's something I care about a lot with my line of work, obviously. It's like, I've been in therapy for a few months now. I normally attend twice a month. It's $70 a session. Okay? Guessing the insurance is kind of what's going on there, because sometimes the rate is higher or lower based on your insurance. You probably don't need me to tell you that, but okay. And this person clearly does not feel like they are getting the help that they need. I don't feel like I'm getting anything out of it besides an unbiased listening ear, which you should be getting more out of it than that, by the way. Most sessions she lets me talk and doesn't make any suggestions. Ooh, not good. So as any of you who are regularly on Twitter following me or on Facebook would be able to find out here, I am really big on EMDR. It's the therapy that I perform. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's an empirically based therapy that helps orient your brain to the present so that your brain recognizes, hey, wait a minute, this traumatic event that we're processing was in the past. Well, how does it do that? Through horizontal eye movements, which orient the brain to the present, activate distal memory connections, and also ground you in the present. So it's got a braking and accelerating function at once. It connects you to memories related to the traumatic event, like it brings that event up, but it also grounds you in the present. Okay, so that is a therapy mode that helps to desensitize or take down the emotional vividness of traumatic memories. That's a little more than just listening, right? So that's kind of the route I go, is I help my clients through that. What is another great therapy out there? Well, brain spotting is kind of like a cousin to EMDR. It involves using eye movement to like find your think spots, or where you feel most upset, like when you move your eyes, like what you're accessing the memory at that point. It's very interesting stuff. But I would say if you're shopping, if you're in the market for a therapist, please look not just for someone who's licensed and either has like a PhD or a master's. I have a master's and a license. Okay, but also look for postgraduate training. That's very important, right? Like, you don't just go to a doctor, and you usually go to one who's a pediatrician, a general practitioner, a psychiatrist, a surgeon, whatever. You wanna determine like what their specialty is, right? Depending on what your needs are, you're going to go to them, and it's going to be based on that specialty. So the same thing with therapy. If you have PTSD, you want to go to a therapist who has EMDR training, that therapy I was telling you about, that's very focused on eliminating the emotional aftermath of harmful traumatic events. And a trauma is anything where you felt immobilized and in danger, right? Like, if you choose to be in an enclosed room, but you're not in danger, great. But if you're in danger, but you can escape and you're not enclosed, great. You'll usually get through it. But if you're trapped and you're in danger, that's the recipe for trauma, okay? That is kind of, and don't take my word for it, Peter Levine, who did this book, Waking the Tiger, and does somatic experiencing therapy, another good one for trauma, by the way, another great therapy for trauma. Take his word for it. He's a seasoned veteran in the field, and I quoted him in the paper that I'll be releasing here. But this is a really big issue. This idea of feeling like you're just talking and not getting anything good out of it. That is something that I hear from a lot of clients that they've experienced in the past from other therapists. And there's nothing, look, if you're a therapist and you potentially have you don't know what route to go, and let's say you have an issue like knowing what to do with clients, there's no shame in that, right? Go get continuing education. I'm just going to tell it like it is. Grad school alone is often not quite enough for people to really get a good grip on the brain. Like, it's a smorgasbord of theoretical modalities. Like, your graduate school person, somebody who has a master's and just graduated, usually knows a lot about a little. They have a lot of different introductory theories, like narrative therapy. So looking at your problem as if it's an oncoming issue that it's like, oh, well, when my inattention comes up or my lack of motivation, like, you externalize the problem and look at it as like an oncoming invader, right? That's a big thing. That's a big modality, but it's like, okay, so what do you do after that? Well, you kind of go from there in treatment plan, blah, blah, blah. But to really get in depth as a therapist, you've got to get some postgraduate training. The good news is you can get trained in EMDR in grad school. For me, my clinical identity is really forged in EMDR because I learned this mode of looking at the brain as an inference engine, and that trauma then changes the trajectory of what you predict. Like, you're in a dark room, you're going to predict, oh, I'm going to get hurt, versus, oh, it's an ambiguous situation. So I got trained in EMDR soon after I graduated from grad school. So that's my benefit, is I got really inundated with a lot of neuroscientific knowledge out of the gate. Just what I got. And I knew, like, I'm pretty young going into this. I don't really know everything there is about the field, to be quite understated. So, look, let's go back to the question here. I've told her once before, I need something to deal with my anxiety. She gave me a paper with questions to ask myself. Look, you don't just need handouts. That's not the end-all, be-all with therapy. You've got to have some interaction. You've got to have some dynamic back and forth. It's got to be like desensitizing and reprocessing your beliefs. Like, what is it that makes you believe this? What does your anxiety tell you? Okay, where do you feel it in your body? Here's a key thing to keep in mind. Anxiety is always a physical problem. It's never just worry. Worry is the cognitive part, right? But anxiety is a full-bodied experience all the time. Notice, you feel it in your chest, you feel it in your shoulders, you feel it in your body, you feel like you might get sick, right? That's because your fight or flight system has been activated and you're getting mobilized to either move or fight. And so what I would say to this client is, notice when you start to tense up and experiment. Do the opposite. Untense your posture. Do stuff to unclench. Go tell yourself verbally, I'm safe, I'm okay. Start counteracting it as soon as you notice it. There's so much to do. See, good therapeutic training is like it's like getting the notes learning the notes on a piano. Once you know the notes, you can then build a concerto out of them. As a therapist, once you learn the basics of the way the brain works and you learn the interventions that can go against anxiety, then you can combine them, recombine them, change them, invert them, subvert them in any way possible based on that knowledge. It's very cool. And here's the problem. I hear this so often from people when they come to me. They're like, wow, therapy, I wish there was more solid stuff to it. It's like, oh, there is. I can show you some concrete, actual modalities, and I do, EMDR, that chart your progress, that show you definable, quantifiable results and get you where you want to be. But you got to look for someone who offers it, right? You can't just go to someone straight out of grad school or someone whose modality is person-centered therapy. By the way, if someone's entire resume or their little blurb online talks about essentially like supporting you or opening a space, or like it's a bunch of stuff that sounds nice, but they don't have any certificates, postgraduate education listed, this is probably what you're getting. You're probably going to get a lot of nice listening, and look, that's okay, it's ethical. There's nothing unethical about this, but you should know, if you want solid interventions, what to look for. EMDR, brain spotting, somatic experiencing therapy, sensory motor psychotherapy from Pat Ogden, okay? there's so many schools of thought that get you where you want to go in terms of actual therapeutic wisdom and like the development of insight about your own brain. It's like an owner's manual. Okay? That's what you're looking for. And it sucks that clients don't know what they don't know. And I'm here, my big mission is to tell you. So anyone out there wanting therapy, you're not crazy if you feel like you didn't get help for just kind of someone nodding and being supportive, right? Okay, I'm frustrated because I want to do the work to be better me, but she's not providing the tools. Well, like I just went over that. I feel like I'm emotionally raw at the end of the session without much guidance. So this person needs to also do kind of a banishing ritual, or to use kind of old school magical terms, or a concluding like emotional release exercise. Okay, so something like imagining a calm place, imagining a container that you put your negative memories or experiences into. That's going to be the way to go with that. Like, so you're not crazy if you're feeling like you're not getting a lot out of your therapy, if you're not getting the tools there to figure it out. If you're being given a sheet to track, well, somebody's not happy. There's honking going on in the neighborhood. Oh well. There's like, you have to be given some itinerary or direction on where to go and what to do to know. So, I mean, I just want to validate that. So, if you feel emotionally raw too, you should check out the Headspace app or the Calm app. That's a good one. So, I really like that. Either of those is really good. And the therapist should be suggesting it. I always tell clients, the real test of therapy is what you do with what we do between sessions. How you mobilize what we've talked about and what I've done with you in your outside life, right? That's the key, because that's going to be worth more than any, like, what do you do therapy once a week? 1 hour a week? Okay? And how many more hours in the week are there? Right, a lot more. Exponentially more, in fact. So what we have to do is teach clients what to do when we're not there. And a lot of that is going to involve breath work, because when you breathe deeply and slowly, you activate your vagus nerve. And what is your vagus nerve? It's the 10th largest cranial nerve in the brain, and it's the brake to your sympathetic nervous system. Isn't that cool? And you activate it directly when you breathe slowly for the better part of a minute, about 40 seconds. So I would really encourage that. You feel like you're emotionally raw, talk about therapy makes me feel like I'm going to be counterproductive by even attending. Well, look, there's nothing wrong with this therapist. It's just not a good fit, potentially, right? It's okay if a relationship isn't working. It's not a good fit. You need somebody else. You want to change it up. Neither of you are wrong, right? But you both might need to go on to different people, right? That's how except finding a therapist is arguably more sacred, and more could go wrong than getting in a bad relationship, because you get a bad therapist and they could put bad ideas in your mind and like give you bad memes, or those what we would call transmissible ideas, like you learn, oh well, there's nothing I can do, or I need to just accept this. It's like, no, that's a terrible meme that has then infiltrated your way of thinking, and you become more victimized. It's like, that's horrible. Okay, so I think we've dwelled long enough on this. So yeah, so this is this is another therapist saying that this is not exactly the best way to go. So I'm happy with that. That's a pretty good way to go. CBT is good. I'm seeing that being recommended here as the way to go. So cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, is very focused on changing the way you think about things and taking your 4 granted presuppositions and dissecting them, like the idea that, oh, that person would laugh at me, and you ask yourself, well, if what I'm doing matters enough, why does it matter if someone laughs at me? Why am I giving that much care and concern? That's a path to go. I've gone that direction with clients before. I have some CBT training. I'm far more trained in trauma, though, and in looking at things and saying, well, what emotions are you getting? What emotional reaction viscerally? Usually kind of feels like you got shot with adrenaline in the chest, like tensing when you feel like somebody could laugh at you. Let's work with that. Let's train down. Let's down-regulate that response and upregulate your capacity for calming yourself. Let's do that like a DJ, right? Very apropos, given that I'm dressed like an e-boy today with my e-boy headphones here. But that's really going to be the goal, is whatever all roads lead to kind of the same goal with any active kind of therapy, which is teaching you how to put the brakes on the emotions you don't want, increase the ones you do. Bada bing, bada boom. That's the therapy. That's the stuff. Okay, let's get out of this question and on to another one. I think I have what is called a dependent... Ooh, let's take a look at this. Ba-ba-da-bop. Okay. 2 months ago, my now ex-girlfriend broke up with me. Okay, and since then I haven't been able to... Okay, a minute. I haven't been able to enjoy my hobbies. And spending time with family and friends. Okay. No matter what I do, it doesn't bring me joy or helps me distract myself. I almost always think about my ex and how to meet her needs in order to get her back. We haven't been together for a long time, but she still gave me the feeling of being home and safe. Uh-oh. Okay. All right, everybody. All right, gang. We're getting some bad boundary beeps here. Bad boundary alarm. Still, I have fears of being left by her, which eventually happened. Okay. So, right here. All right, let's get here. Right here at the very beginning, at the outset here, I'm seeing a common problem people make, which is to make their significant other like their end-all, be-all quest. Okay? And so doing that is a surefire recipe to have a bad time, number one. And B, there's this tendency there to obsess about the person and really do what it takes to have them be your favorite, have them be pleased and completely happy, and everything is about them, and that can frighten people, and it can make them feel very cornered and claustrophobic, right? So when you make someone constantly feel like they're your center of attention, that can have the opposite effect. So that's a problem. And it's tough because when we do, we're not always told, hey, please, have good boundaries and I want to be your partner, but I also don't want to be your whole world, and I want to be there, but we also have to have our separate lives. We don't always have instructions on that, and sometimes men and women, right, get this idea that the way to go is to make someone your universe. So I'm not going to blame movies with kind of the storybook sort of stuff. I'm not going to completely blame that. I think that our narrative about that is very damaging. I think this idea that we should always have everyone be our everything, our sun and moon stars, that's a very damaging thing to do. Because for both parties involved, you've got to have good boundaries and good friendships outside of a relationship, right? That's kind of the biggest thing that you can do besides have a good grounding in relationship theory ahead of time. So the big thing is recognize if you're living for someone else so if all you have is someone else, they're going to feel pressure. And you're going to feel upset whenever they're not around. Okay? Full stop. Now, if your girlfriend's where you feel safe and like home, that was the big phrase that got me. Okay? That's a problem. Because your girlfriend should be someone that you're excited with and that compliments you. And I mean compliments with an E and not an I. So not verbally compliments, but compliments your lifestyle is an addition to, is a supplement, augments your life, right? Makes it better. But isn't your refuge completely? If you have a death in the family or you have something and you need family members and friends to anchor you. Of course that makes sense. 2.5 months into something, Nah, fam, that's not really anchor material, right? You're not relying on that person to anchor you. That person might be a little bit of a buoy, or more of like a kind of person to keep, like, to offer you support, but not your everything, right? And so being clingy and being too reliant on someone early on is a good way to run them off. And I would possibly estimate that this person, our OP here, our original poster, may have done that. It may have run the person off. Because again, like, you have to, in relationships, start slowly. I'll be right back. Technical hair difficulties. Okay. Like, you have to start slowly and build up, right? That's the big thing. It's like, and people, sadly, often, I hear this all the time, as you would expect, being a therapist. People will often do the very thing that they're afraid, like they're afraid of losing someone. And so they do the very thing that runs that person off. And you could say there's a subconscious element to it where they're afraid of the suspense. They'd rather just know that the person's lost. Or you can say, which is a little more measurable, that it's due to kind of the protest behavior of, like, protesting when someone's gone. It's a reaching out. It's a way. It's like an attachment cry. That's what that would be called. And it's a very mammalian, ancient response. But again, let's go back to trauma. When we have poor attachment, then we have poor expectations for our mates, and we think that they're going to leave, or we're afraid they can't serve our needs, and we constantly demand them, or we think when they're gone, we don't have object constancy, we don't have object permanence, and we don't have a belief implicitly. We may explicitly believe it if someone asked us, we consciously believe it, but we don't believe in our hearts that our partner is going to stick around. And so that can be helped with EMDR, with noticing your anxiety and doing things to quell that, right? Again, breathing deeply activates the vagus nerve, which calms down your overactive fight or flight response. So let's keep going here. The worst of it is that I'm at a point in my life where I have to decide what to do for a living and where to move, or if I should move at all. Big decision. But there's almost nothing I can think of that I want to do for a living. Aha! Okay. All of my caterwauling and rambling, and here we are at the real point. And this is a problem for a lot of people now, right? Is they're taught, oh, well, I need to find a partner, or I need to do this. Find out who you are before you find a partner, or at least concurrently. Know who you are. Find out what you want. Everything you do until the age of about 22 needs to be to determine what you're passionate about. God forbid if I had gotten derailed obsessing about relationships instead of determining I wanted to do neuroscience-based therapy for people, right? It's like, okay, well, that's a problem. You have to look at it as, like, a person complements your mission and they're fun and they're a partner and you both care about each other and it's a sacred pairing off, or if you're in an open relationship or whatever, more than two people, you know what I mean. But the problem is if you don't know what your life's quest is, right? If you're questless and you get the mate, like finding the princess is your whole goal, once you found her, what do? Well, you try to keep her. How do you try to keep her? By being annoyingly clingy, right? Never make the princess your goal. And for one thing, that's objectifying. We could go the feminist route with that and say, well, if you've made a woman your entire goal, you've dehumanized her, right? And you're not partners in crime. You're not continually growing dynamically. You've basically turned her into this thing that you have to keep and dust off. And people can sense that. And it freaks them out. It creeps them out, right? So this person sounds pretty young, okay? And so we're looking at it and it's like, well, I don't know what I want to do in life yet. That's your goal. That's what matters, not the relationship. If she comes back in your life, great. If not, you'll meet someone else in the pursuit of your dreams and your goals and who you are and what you want to be. Okay? So there's almost nothing I think of that I want to do. I hate every job I can think of. One exception is translating. There's no promising perspective. Okay. I realize that aside from playing video games, reading, and watching movies, I have zero interest, or better said, my interests depend on the people I love or think I love. Right. Every possible circumstance in life felt endurable and okay as long as I knew that I had my ex-girlfriend. Now being alone, I don't want to do anything in my life and am unable to decide what to do with myself. Apparently, I depend so much on a romantic relationship that I'm not able to live on my own and, most importantly, make decisions on my own. I'm so sad and lost. Okay, well, look, OP, I'm really proud of your insight. Okay? I just think that needs to be said. Brilliant insight. And where you go from here is to determine what you want, what you're good at. And if you enjoy movies and reading, great. Do you want to go to school and translate that to technical writing? Like you enjoy reading stuff, maybe you want to write something too. Maybe you want to take that and your love of reading can be translated to something else, right? Like there's so much you could do with that, OP. It's a beautiful thing. So many people don't enjoy reading, right? And video games, this is a big one. Hand-eye coordination, critical thinking, engagement with material. Depends on what kind of video games, right? The earlier video games of the 80s, before my time substantially, were very hand-eye coordination and pattern recognition based. Our video games now are very narrative, dense, rich in terms of detail. And so if you enjoy that, then maybe you'd be good as a professor or teaching something or whatever. But all of your hobbies sound very critical thinking based. Pursue that. Take some personality inventories. Take the Myers-Briggs. I know people have a lot to say about that, but it's a starting point. If you don't like your results, don't go buy them. That's the good point. But do some things to find out who you are. Okay? And also go see a therapist who specializes in attachment trauma, because dependent personality disorder is related to the lack of foundation and formation of your own id impulses, like not being able to put them into your own desires. Okay, and we could get very analytic about that, but it's not worth our time here. It's more worth it to say, you've discovered the problem. That's 50% of the work. Now the other 50% is working like hell to overcome them through saying, who can I be that I'd be comfortable being alone with myself? What do I love? Who am I? What am I about? These are crucial questions. And believe me when I say they have answers. You are not without hope. You will have those answers. Okay? But they will take a little bit of time here, a few months, right? Like, that's not much for a lifetime of a quest, right? If you like video games, start gamifying your life. Start looking at circumstances and saying, okay, what can I do to turn my job search into a quest? Is an application? How many XP do I get for that? Okay, how many experience points? If this sounds goofy, believe me, a video game is what is doing this. You get XP for quests, you get loot. Find out what loot would make things worthwhile for you, for God's sake. That's huge. Like, what reward do you need to give yourself? Would it be some ice cream? Would it be... what would it be that matters to you? And how do you incrementally reward yourself? Life is about gamifying things we don't want to do, right? It's like I taught myself how to attach this software to Restream and then to broadcast. It's like that was incremental. How do I use this software? How do I plug it into Restream? How do I do this and that and the other thing? It's like, great. Now I know all this stuff and I broke it down. By the way, therapists, you got to practice what they preach, okay? Now, I have a heart for fellow therapists, and I know that they work hard as hell in these times especially. But y'all, we gotta do better and show our clients how to live like this, how to actually pursue incremental goals, smart goals, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Time-bound's important. Set an arbitrary time limit. I told myself, I'm going to live stream this weekend. It's Sunday today. It's kind of nice outside here. I'm doing it. To hell with the fact that I haven't closed a lot of my tabs that I'm going to come back to later. Who gives a shit? If you think it's dumb, oh well. The tabs are dumb. I don't care. I'm sharing clinically relevant information accumulated over 6 years of schooling and 5 years of intensive clinical full-time experience. That's worth a few tabs being messy, right? You got to not give a shit to an extent about like what it's going to look like to fail. Fail forward. Pursue your goals. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. If you were a kid and you were afraid to bike because you thought you'd look dumb crashing, guess what? You never learned to ride a bike. And if we were as self-conscious as kids learning to talk as we are as adults when we try something new, we'd all be mute because we'd stop talking after adults laughed at us for mispronouncing words like spaghetti. So that's a big thing. That's big brain mode. Once you start to realize that our self-consciousness is what stops us from doing whatever we want to do, you will be unstoppable. You will have the steel-forged resilience of a titan. Okay, so I think that's enough on that. So, yeah, dependent personality disorder, definitely a probability here. And I think this person may have just never... But let's not... Look, I believe in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is where this person's getting this diagnosis. I believe diagnoses are real. I just spent time talking about how I believe in PTSD and treat it. So, for God's sake, do I believe in diagnoses? However, I think that we start to constrict ourselves when we live based entirely off of a title. And I think that we have to look at it as a guiding point, a guidepost, and learn that we can live beyond that, and that we can actually become more than the sum of our diagnosis. And so it's like, well, where does this originate from? That's a great question. That's a useful one, because then what do we do to unravel that? Well, how an EMDR session would look like saying, okay, what made you feel like being alone was terrible? Okay, let's reprocess that with eye movement. Let's have you think of that target, meaning that memory, how upsetting it is to be alone, and let's desensitize it and reprocess it so that your brain recognizes, wait a minute, I prefer not to be alone, but it's okay. I'll get through it. That's all right. Right? So that is the most important thing to keep in mind, is that you are always going to have a kind of past thing that you held on to, a part of your identity, and present behavior that comes out of that, right? And a lot of we want that to be the present behavior. We want it to be like, oh, I learned that I can fail, but that I can get better, so I'm going to boldly do my hobbies, right? You learned that in the past. Or you may have learned that failure is insurmountable, unacceptable, and if you don't do something right the first time, give up, right? Ooh, that strikes a chord with a lot of people when I start talking about that. Because then they start to realize, wait a minute, my narrative is very binary about failure and success. I've learned that I can't make mistakes. Wow, that's fucked up. Right, it is. And you can overcome it. It's the good news. So, let's do some more. I love this because it's like teeing up something that I can then hit out of the park with some answers here. I'm 14. I'm 14. I'm 12, and this is deep, right? You OG meme lords will know about that one. I'm 14. I'm planning on asking my parents to get a therapist, and I was wondering if me being 14, if I mean allowed to swear in the room. I feel like I could get my point across easier if I swear. Yes, you're allowed to swear in front of a therapist. Yes. Okay. All right. That's a shorter one. Okay. Yell and do. Hey, let's upvote that. Yeah, that's noteworthy. Yes. Okay. No. Okay. Go back. All right. Dealing with grief. Okay. No, not okay. Technical difficulties while live streaming. Doesn't really matter because it's just a few moments here, right? All right, this is a short one, but very dense, apparently. My grandma passed away last year, and I still can't accept it. Moreover, I now have fear of losing, not seeing, again, other people I love. I struggle with anxiety and panic attacks. I've tried therapy, but right now I can't afford it. Okay, so let's talk for a minute here. I'm going to go a different direction with this. So, depending on where you're located in the U.S. or out of country, you can find places to get therapy for free. Pastoral counseling, if you're religious, at a temple or a mosque or wherever, apart from a Christian church, because pastoral counseling, Christian connotations, you can seek out therapy and find it. You can also go to grad programs, and a lot of times the therapists are learning how to counsel and they will have a lot of different book recommendations for you. So I know earlier I said that if therapists don't have post-grad training, they might not know what to do with stuff. I think the big thing to keep in mind there is that's kind of it depends on what you're looking for. And if you're wanting book recommendations to someone to process grief with, and just to have a therapeutic dialogue, someone in grad school is very close to the literature, and they can direct you on books, and you guys can talk about it together. And it would be for free. Ding, ding, ding. If you find therapists in their internships, it's like getting a haircut from someone in cosmetology school who's just learning how to be a cosmetologist, or a hairstylist, if you will. That's the fancy term for it. So, The Body Keeps the Score is a good book. It's about trauma, but trauma involves a huge modicum, a huge degree of grief and loss, of innocence, of abstractions like that. I would say if you check out anything by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who did the 5 stages of grief, that's going to be huge. Anything by someone who has their chops and bona fides in an MD or a PhD or an LPC or anything like that, I would say is going to be a pretty good resource. EMDR for grief, like integrating that person into your memory while honoring that they passed away, and like recognizing that they're gone physically in the here and now, but that they live on through you, or if you have beliefs in an afterlife, that too. And that's all going to be very crucial. So stay safe. This is such a nice OP. What a nice person. I hope they found what they're looking for. And I plan on reaching out to these people too. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. So this is a good one. This is for someone who is not sure what's going to happen when they get back from deployment. And I think one of the let's just read through it together here. All right. Behind the scenes with the Fox Den. Okay. Oh, I've got a dead USB port. That's great. It doesn't matter. I just want to get some reassurance that other people have had problems in their marriage that were resolved while in deployment once they got back. Well, first of all, that's true. I've worked with people who've had that issue, but we're not going to go there too deep, obviously. I love my wife, and we are both faithful, but she doesn't understand the different stresses of deployment that give me emotionally charged responses to problems back home because I can't talk about my mission at all. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to say, OP, that you need to find a hobby or something that helps you discharge that tension, because you're going to be pretty... I mean, it's very tense to think about this stuff, and that you can't share it. Talk to a therapist. Talk to someone who you can speak to about it. And if you can't, still, because it's confidential, it's stuff that you're not allowed to discuss, fine. Be able to get that out somehow through exercise or whatever. Get that anxious energy out. It's got to go somewhere, okay? But your wife has to understand that people react differently to trauma. I'm assuming this is a man. If not, it's fine. It works out either way. But men and people in the military, people who are in these kind of professions, often have to keep a stiff upper lip and be very emotionally reserved. And so you have to counter that by getting that energy out somehow. And you can do that through EMDR. You can do that through somatic experiencing therapy, which involves moving in the way you wish you could when you were tense, under the guidance of a therapist. You can do it through working out, too, on your own. I mean, that's a big thing, is getting that physical energy out. But you have to have someone that you can talk to about this stuff, even if it's not the details of your mission, which obviously you can't share. And your wife has to understand the nature of trauma, and that it can cause people to have an increased startle response and an increased emotional reactivity. And so there's going to be here's a good thing, like for 20 minutes when you get home, maybe there's like a no deep conversation rule. And you have some time to cool down, either literally which can be helpful with a cold shower, or figuratively, or whatever way you want to go with that. But let's keep going here. The OP says that wife thinks the government is up to something. Let's keep in mind I'm not doing anything crazy, heroic, or infantry. I just can't talk about what we do. Right, very common in military or law enforcement or whatever. She thinks that the government is up to something fishy because of it, and I'm hiding things from her, but I just can't talk about details of what I do. Right. I'm military police, and right now everyone hates cops. Right. Sorry to hear that. I've wanted to be a cop since I was a kid. My wife is on this F police kick, which is taking away from my dream. What do I do? Ah, boy. What a rough conversation. I mean, look. I'm not going to get into the intricacies of this topic from a moral, foundational kind of level of what the, like, where you could, because we could go a lot of places with this. But where I am going to go is to say, no matter what your job, if your partner has an ideological objection to it, the relationship's not going to work, or at least it's going to take a lot of overhauling. So I would say you guys have to be on the same page. And so she has to either understand that what you're doing isn't abusive and that it's something she can support, or that she just has to not communicate anti-you rhetoric, right? Like, I'm not at all glossing over injustices or anything like that. Again, I'm making this very general, actually. For any job that someone has, if their partner is not supporting them, it's not going to go well. It's not going to be sustainable. If you feel like you're being attacked on the outside, and then you feel like you're being attacked in the home too, there's no place. You're not going to have any refuge. And I've worked with men like this, actually, where they'd feel, and maybe their partner doesn't have an actual ideological objection to the line of work, but their partner does kind of throw off on it and doesn't really respect it, or doesn't care at the end of the day what their husband's doing. And it can go either way, with husbands not respect their wives. So I would say you got to get that under, you got to have some authentic dialogue about that, or it's not going to improve. And you can't have your partner, like, this is the exact opposite from the last case I talked about, or the next to last case with the person who had dependent personality disorder, where it's like someone who actually has it wants too much out of a partner, and you, like, at least deserve your partner not verbally or attacking you over what you do, right? Like, it's a partner should be supportive but not your everything. It's about boundaries. It's about clear middle on stuff. It's like, that's important to realize. So, okay. That's the big thing that I would say is you've got to keep in mind that you're not going to be able to sustain being completely beset on all sides. Home has to be a safe zone, literally and physically, literally and figuratively. So we're gonna be done with that for now. Gosh, that's rough. You need some good marital counseling on that. This is really wild. What on earth? Okay, let's dive into this one. Therapy, but the therapist is painting.